going to run out of batteries at some point because we know we've got loads of stuff to do. Oh, welcome to another Reloved Guitars video, and this one is Rob's Cruiser by Crafter, and this is going to get a full setup, and on top of that it's going to get a replacement bridge. Now this is going to be a little of a challenge because it's a full weight block bridge, and it's going to require probably some routing here or in the back. We've got everything all being equal, we've just got to make sure that it's got room to work as down only. I think Rob mainly wanted it for the extra sustain, so the first thing we've got to do is obviously make sure it fits and lines up with the current intonated marks, which is what I've just done there, just to start off the process. So it's going to, I'm just trying to think of the order of things here. I think probably the best thing to do is to set the playing action, get everything done and get the frets done first, get that out of the way, loose the strings, start working on the here. And we may have to take the electrics right out in order to get access or get a good clean run at the routing, whatever needs to be done. But once we get the new tremolo thing out and lined up, we'll see what we're dealing with. Now, just looking down here for a minute, sorry, it's always the way I put the camera in the way of the camera. So one of the challenges here is that this bridge is a 52.5 spaced bridge. That's an E to E spacing of 42.5, whereas this one here, being a Wilkinson, it's a Wilkinson bridge, is a 54. So the first thing we know is we've actually got wider spacing, which means the strings are going to sit further out here, so they're going to be closer to the edge of the guitar. The block is bigger, so that's going to provide us with a bit of a challenge to fit that in. So typically these guitars are made to run with what they've got. So we've got a split here on the plate, which just to note everything. Yeah, so typically the rout is made to fit the size or the mass of the bridge concerned. So we may find that it's not going to have enough room, in which case we're going to have to extend it. It's not too bad a shape, there's quite a lot of room there, but obviously we've got to get this baby in here, and it's got to sit with the saddles in the right sort of place to begin with. So we won't really get a feel for any of that until we're able to drop that in and move it around. Then we're going to have to drill and fill the original holes. We're going to have to then very, very carefully align this new one, put it in where it needs to be, and then we have to assess whether it can move. The problem is sometimes you can be tempted to push it forward a bit to create a bit more movement for this larger block, but then you're running out of intonation, you're forcing the saddles to go back. We don't really want to do that. So ideally, if it's close, then that's not so bad, but we're just going to have to do this as sensibly as possible. What we don't really want to do is be spending the whole of our lives trying to rework this bridge. So the first thing to do is the first fret action on this with the old nut looks pretty good. I've got a tusk nut that we're going to make adjustable. We've got new 10 strings to go on there, and then the bridge changeover, and we're going to make sure everything's good and playing, and get rid of some of this plastic stuff. Part of this is going to involve lining the neck up to make sure everything's dead central, particularly the bridge. This isn't a perfect fit. I can see this neck has been moved or something, so I'm not sure what's happened there, but it's cracked a bit of the finish around the edge. That's often the case when things aren't perfectly fitted. So first things to do is let us just check the last fret action in this case. So I'm going to get myself a adjustery thing, otherwise known as a screw thing, hex screw. But let's have a look at the neck relief for a minute. It's actually quite small, we won't worry about that for a minute. Let's have a look at the neck, the last fret action, which is a bit too big. So let's take this down to where we want. So it doesn't matter that we're going to get rid of this bridge and change everything around. This part of it, i.e. getting the action set for fret leveling, is perfectly fine to do it with this old bridge setup. So about 1.5 there. This is a very flat neck, so I better follow it all the way across. Yeah, it's a very flat neck, so probably more of a 16-inch radius, something like that, which is fairly common in these Far East guitars. It's not bad actually, it's about right. So I'm trying to go across in a sort of gradient to about 1.5 mils on the high E, which is the normal action I'm aiming for. So 1.5 on the low E to 1.2 on the high E is what I should have said. So 1.2-ish. So that's the action set there. The relief's okay to work with. We can alter it later if we wish, but it's nothing out of the ordinary, it's pretty good. So we tune up and get everything roughly. Actually, what we'll do first is we'll select the strings off and mark up the frets. No, let's just have a feel first. Ooh, that neck. I'm not too thrilled with that. That's moving a bit. Let's do a bit of advanced tightening class. Hold on a second. Yikes. Part done up, part not. Okay, that's probably a bit better. Now what was it? Oh yes, I was going to select the strings. Now hopefully these won't snap, because I want to just access the access the frets to mark them up. This this nut has had a bit of finish put over the top of it to sort of colour it a little bit. The strings are a bit on the rusty side, so I'm sort of against the clock a little bit here, because I've got this planned now to go out tomorrow, so I've got to get this whole thing done, including the bridge, in one go, which is not impossible, but I don't have any room for error, but then I don't anyway, so what am I worrying about? So looking at these frets as I do them, they're not hugely tall, so I've got to be careful to make this play. Now this is one of the things that I haven't played the guitar. Sorry, I have played the guitar. There's some dead giveaway killer choke outs that I picked up earlier on, and I'll find them again now with the fret leveling process. Not keen on these metallic, what do you call them, roller string tree things, but I guess they're all right. I'll do. But sort of making the string go off in funny ways. So the idea now is to get everything on, giving it a little pull to seat it again. Ugh, what that was. whatever that was, it pulled a load of slack through, which won't have been helping things in string tightening or tuning stability land. So now we want to get the thing up to pitch again. Okay, so that's my frets marked up and ready basically to level. So let's get stuck in straight away with the leveling kit and we'll see what it tells us about the problem areas. So being a flat radius, it should be quite forgiving in terms of not getting too many bend choke outs and stuff like that, but it's not a guarantee that you don't get any. So we will not assume. I know there was a bit of a problem. This is coming out of the end here. Sit back down, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to bend this, tailor it to get the same curve. Dead on. Okay. So here we go with the high E track. Let's see what it tells us. So with very little pressure, I'm just going to run this over the frets. And a nice thing about this method is because I can see what I'm doing and I can play what I'm doing as well with the strings being still on. So I can very quickly ascertain when I've got it working to target action I've set. So I can replace the string, lift it up and play. That's okay, I'll do a tiny bit more. So there's hardly any leveling really done already on there, so I'm going to do a little bit more, and I'm doing it back to front just for fun, just to take advantage of both aspects of the curve on this thing. I don't know why, it's just quite a cool, makes me feel good to do it back to front. Okay, so I'm going to call that one done for the high E track. Now I'm going to move across into the B track and do a little bit of work on that. It's quite windy out there now, but it's nice having opened the window. It's cooled off, taking away the humidity in here. So I've got a low fret or two showing up the top here, but they're not too bad. There's one very low one up there. Overall, looking not too bad at the moment. Again, it will be, proof will be in the playing. So from 12 to about 19, could do with a little bit more persuasion. So now what I do is I just sort of focus on this end of it a little bit more. Same calibration, but I'm just hitting it a bit harder at this end rather than the other end. And it's still running across the other frets, taking a little bit with it, but I know that the bigger need for leveling is right up here. And I'll get that to play then without any kind of slight zings at all. Good. Okay, now we'll calibrate for the G track. So again, with a flat radius like these modern Far East strats have, you don't usually anticipate too many problems with getting chokes on bends. It's much less common. it's much more common with the tight radius of the vintage Strat, for example, the 7.25, or even the 9.5 and below. Sometimes the 9.5 can be a little bit temperamental in that respect. So now I'm going to level the G track, having calibrated the beam again. The challenge when it comes to upgrading the bridge on something like this is whether or not this thing will work with the extra width. And then also the question of whether you widen with chisels, Dremels, or whether you route extra space. Sort of 9 to 10, 8 to 12 there a little bit. Oh, this string is definitely trying to come off, whatever. Is it trying to come off the peg? I think it is. It's not really well attached. Don't want to stay on. It's slipping. So about 9 to 12. Let's put a bit more, concentrate a bit more welly into this spot here. And how much is kind of, what's the word, intuitive really. I mean, truth is, you do it until it clears up, but you have to be weighing it up against the cost in fret metal. Okay, left with that. Now calibrate for the D and the A and the E. Now these strings, you tend to find these are where you'll get what I call fret slap, more as much as, if not more than, fret buzz. So fret buzz is what I call the buzzing you get from single high or low frets, which are sort of, you can tell when you're hitting fret buzz. It's because it's usually in a fret in a single spot on the neck, on a single track. So it's not, it doesn't sort of extend everywhere. It's usually in just one place. And when you find fret buzz, it's the product of either a single high fret or a single low fret. And obviously, sort of, we're more familiar with the idea of thinking about leveling that back, leveling it under control, if you like. I distinguish the two kinds of buzz: fret buzz, which is caused by usually a single low and or a single high fret, and what I call fret slap, which is when we stop thinking about, fret slap, which is where we encounter an area of low frets and followed by an area of high frets. So it's more when we're listening to fret slap, when we're listening to fret slap, what we're hearing is the effect of different areas getting in the way, not just a single fret, but it's a kind of crop of frets getting in the way, and so the way to alleviate that is kind of, one level appears to be the same as just leveling out fret buzz, but actually what I do is I slightly change the way I use the rod. I'm much more likely when I'm dealing with fret slap, which that is, I'm much more likely to start by using the banana very lightly, with trying to, because the idea is what I'm trying to do is allow the beam to map its ideal curve onto the bumpy neck. So we've taken a sample. When I'm calibrating this, I'm kind of approximating the curve of this neck between these 3 points. And that, on the bar, on the beam, whatever you call it, the banana, produces a sort of an idealized curve because it bends more smoothly, in fact, than the neck does. So now we've got an ideal curve sitting on a bumpy curve. If I'm careful and I just allow the bar to keep its shape, and I just work it, up and down with as little distortion as possible, then what I tend to find out is that it starts to work off the peaks of the hills, if you like, and creates a little bit of extra space, and I can feel it doing it. It's now taken away some of the peaks, and in taking away the peaks it starts to kind of even out the space between the peaks and the troughs, and so we're leveling the neck at this point rather than individual frets. That's probably the best way to think about it. A little bit of fret slap still in that whole thing. I can hear it just hanging in there. It's improving, but it still needs a bit more. So again, I take the bar with its same configuration or calibration on it, and I'm going to just let it do its thing of imposing its curve onto the slightly ragged. Now I'm pressing a little harder in the middle here because I want the thing overall to keep the same shape, but I want to sort of hurry up the amount it's taking from the hilltops, because basically when you've got those high and low spots, you're basically trying to bottom out the high spots and reduce the high spots and bottom out the low spots. I'll do a tiny bit more. It's pretty good. Yeah, so it's in a way the same, but instead of thinking of individual frets, and we're now thinking of clusters of frets and their relationship to each other. So now I'm going to push a little bit harder on all of this now, just to kind of take away, but I'm still staying kind of in the middle with where I'm holding it. So I'm trying to map that nice smooth curve onto the hillocks of this neck, and I'm going to be confident that's good. Now we've got the low E with all its fret slap, and it really is full of it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that we calibrate first of all precisely for this part of the neck. So that's telling me it's too curved, fractionally too curved. So now I'm going to just reduce the curvature very slightly, and that was good. Now take off the E string, spread the thing. Now here we really have to hear the improvement. So we heard loads of fret slap to begin with. So for starters, I'm just going to run this up and down at not much more than gravitational pull. No, under its own weight. And making sure to go right to the edge if I can. So I'm going backwards. I'm going side to side a little bit as well as up and down. So I'm sort of moving across what curve there is. And the idea is to make sure that I don't put just a single flat tangent on the strings at any time. So we'll hear how this so far turns out. Improved, but not good enough. So we're going to probably need to start applying a bit more pressure down onto the E track now to get it to level out. So it's really not a different operation altogether to fret leveling individual frets. It's just that the way I see it is that to think of it as a switch in your mind from two actions. First one is dealing with individual high frets relating to each other as a single or individual frets, to dealing with a series of ups and downs across the whole neck. getting there. But the reason why tends to be quite a lot of fret slap on the low E, of course, is because it's moving much more than any other of the strings. It's got it's a bigger, slacker string relative to the others, and its construction is it's a wound string, and so it's going to move more for the same amount of energy imparted into it by the plectrum or the finger or whatever when you're strumming it. So it's going to, for the same amount of force, it's going to move more, and as a result, when we're in a situation with frets that are, the lower we get, the more critical it is that the frets are perfectly level, and level under strong pressure rather than level with the strings off and the neck on the bench. There's a patch in the middle now that needs working on, and that's pretty good, getting there. Yes, so you know, when you set a low action, you have to work harder on the leveling, because the E string and the A move more, so they're more likely to encounter the frets at this point than any other strings. So if you want the action to be low on this side, you've got to get those frets a little bit more level even than the high side. Badly tuned, but anyway. Okay. Right, well that's better than it was. I might leave it there. We're on a pretty low action here. Are we? We're just on 1.5 and we're low there. So maybe I'm going to do, I'm just going to repeat a tiny bit on the bottom three strings just for good measure while I'm kind of in the mood. So again, how do you know to do this? How do you know when to stop? It's experience, that's all there is to it. You do it enough times and you get a sense of when it's ready to stop, and also you get a sense of when to stop, because you can't get any further improvement out of it, because that's probably the most important situation in the whole, or judgment in the whole thing really, because there is a point at which you can't improve it, and the quickest way to discover that is when you're working on a tight radius like a 7.25, and there comes a point, a height of action at this end that you can't go beyond, no matter how much you level. You'll just be wasting fret metal for no good reason. You'll keep on thinking you're going to get there, and you'll be costing fret metal, and you won't get there, because there is a geometric limitation to how low a 7.25 radius can play, and so it just doesn't make any sense to push harder and level more, because you're wasting metal. Okay, so as you can see, I'm sort of giving this a little bit of extra welly. So I'm kind of going a hint past where I would normally feel like stopping, because I want it to be obviously a tangible difference. So often I get, or not often actually, occasionally I get inquiries where people who aren't familiar with what I do sort of say, you know, could you look at my guitar, and I'm not sure I need the nut changing perhaps, but you know, I think it could be better, or the frets are sharp. And my response is usually, look, you know, even if you've got a bow nut on there, I don't recommend it. It's probably almost certainly going to be catching the strings. So and causing friction. So I recommend that you just start by replacing the nut with a tusk one if you want the thing to stay in tune. So here we go, time to get rid of the frets, having done the leveling. Yeah, so you know, when I started out, I guess I thought about the nature of what I would offer, and I just realized that since the vast majority of guitars come with uneven frets and crappy nuts that have friction in them, there doesn't seem to be any point offering any kind of setup that doesn't involve the precision fret leveling to make the action as low as it can be, which is what most customers seem to want, and also replacing the nut with the best possible nut for tuning stability. You know, it seems crazy to do anything other than that, because you're just kind of cutting corners, really. So my sort of personal motto became, in my head, became, if you can't feel the difference, then I haven't set it up yet. Because it's not trying to be arrogant or clever. It's actually saying, genuinely, unless you can feel the difference, then I'm not charging you. You know, it's no point. I shouldn't be charging you anything if I can't give you back a guitar where you feel immediately a tangible difference. And that just became my watchword to myself, really. And then over time I got to meet loads of people who'd taken their guitars to people and you know, got back guitars. You know, the people had done X amount of time and work, but the customer had got back what felt to them like exactly the same guitar, sometimes even with even higher action, because sometimes what the luthier or tech had done, they would take in the guitar, look at it, find buzz, twiddle around with the neck relief, twiddle around with the saddles, conclude that they actually can't make it play any lower because the frets are in the way, and then end up setting it back higher and saying, look, this is how you have to have it to make it play cleanly. And of course the customer's experience of it is that they come back and will take it away, and it actually feels harder to play than it did before, which feels like an absolutely, well, it just feels like a complete downer. If you're paying money for that, why would you want something that feels worse afterwards than it did at the beginning? So the one thing I realized early on was the only way I can guarantee this feels completely different is to do the fret leveling and give it a new tusk, adjustable usually, nut, with a first fret action set at just the right ultra low setting, you know, and then I know that from that you get a guitar that is going to be completely different in feel from when you gave it to me. And to me, that's the minimum of what I've got to be able to give you to make it worth spending money. Anything else is just, well, it's a kind of hiding to taking money, grudge money off people. I mean, taking money from people who don't really honestly feel they've got much for their investment. So I'd hate to be in that sort of situation. You know, saying, well, I spent 4 hours on it. I'm sorry if you can't feel any different. You know, you still spent 4 hours on it. Well, you don't care I spent 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever, you know. What you want is an improvement. And thankfully, I started out being confident that I could deliver that improvement. Yeah, 99% of the time. There are times where it doesn't quite work out for some reasons. Some of them perceptual reasons, and sometimes a customer gets an idea about something that just can't be shifted, you know, and things don't work out perfectly. But for the vast majority of the time, I mean the overwhelming majority of the time, people will pick up the guitar I've set up for them, and it will feel a world apart from the guitar they brought in. And that, to me, is the minimum I should be doing, which is why I never offered a £45, £50, whatever, light setup, because I couldn't look myself in the mirror if I was taking your money off you for twiddling your saddles up and down, setting them back where you had them or higher even, and just cleaning your fretboard and making a couple of tweaks of a spanner here and there to tell you that I've adjusted things. If I've done all of that and you don't feel absolutely amazed by how different it feels and how much more enjoyable it is to play, then I still haven't given you the value for money that you deserve. So I'm quite a stickler for that. Anyhow, so here's the fun part. I've done the leveling, I've done the recrowning. Now all that remains, all in inverted commas that remains, is to polish this out, which I'll do separately. The nut, I just want to check the radius of this because I have a feeling it's about 16, if not more. Yeah, so we've got a choice here. We either use a 12-inch radius tusk nut and make it adjustable, or we use I actually think the 12-inch radius will be a better option, or we cut a tusk nut. So we take a blank and we cut the slots to give a 16-inch radius. I think the loss of so what I'm trying to do with the adjustable nuts is to retain the factory molded slots. I don't really want to, I'm trying at all costs to avoid cutting into the nut with files, because however carefully I do it, it's still, in a macroscopic sense, it's ragged, and I want the strings, your strings, to be travelling over factory molded slots, not hand cut ones, even no matter how carefully I do it. So I think that for the difference between 12 and 14, which is actually in practice very small, I would suggest we go for a 12-inch adjustable nut, which means we preserve the factory molded slots, and we start with that. And if there's any issue at all, we just amend or tiny adjust one or two slots if there are any issues with height, but I actually don't think it will be noticeable. It's such a small, relatively small amount, but we shall do it and see. Who did this now? I think it was Graphtech themselves recognised that they don't make nuts above 12-inch radius, and so they recommend all the time using, for radii above 12, they recommend using the 12-inch, and they sort of say that the 12-inch radius nut is suitable for all strats with radius above that amount. My precision ear goes, that's not right, because they're different from each other. But on the other hand, it is also such a small amount that I get it. I think realistically, Graphtech don't make a pile of variations above 12-inch radius, because it probably isn't commercially worth their while regarding the amount of tooling and jigging and whatever they have to do in their factory for what would have relatively small market. So what I'm doing is I've just rounded off the frets that were a bit sharp, or just filed them a little bit, and now I'm just using a little bit of sandpaper to just smooth that off as well. So, and I've just protected the fretboard there, as you can see, so that this process doesn't, not the fretboard, I've protected the finish there, so this process doesn't run the risk of scratching that. Okay, so that's cool, I'll bin that. So here comes the fun, doodle-doodle, here comes the fun, and I say, it's alright. Oh, I can't sing that, I'll get copyrighted. Right, so the question now is, how does this bridge sit? And to find out, we will remove the original bridge. Let's bring you up here so you can have a closer look, because this might be of some interest. If I just get that thing to stay there, we in target, yeah, it's sort of there. Right, so first things first, I'm going to remove these. Now for every bridge has a size of tremolo screw that it likes to work with, and if we change a bridge over, we must remember to make sure that the bridge goes with its new tremolo screws that were designed for it. Otherwise we could be in trouble and it won't move freely. So the first thing I want to do is I want to just see how the new bridge fits in without doing anything else. Just drop it in. And because it's a wider spacing, guaranteed it's going to not fit and match this perfectly. So here we go. But we drop it in. Now the first thing I can already feel, oh, it's nearly sticking out the back, but it's just short enough. That's okay. So drop this in here. These holes are now all akimbo. They don't work out. Now the issue is, if you go in line with the original holes, which looks something like this, and there's not a lot of room, so we need to trim. We probably need to trim the plate here to give us a little bit of extra room. Otherwise we're going to be catching the edge of this tremolo. Right, let's just do something first. Oh, we'll put the bridge back in, the original back in. Flimsy a little thing it is too. We'll just press it or hold it in place like so. What I want to do is just mark midpoint. Now that really is a sort of eyeballing situation there, right? That's not very scientific, but what I'm just going to do is to see where we would have to go. So we need a bit of space. This has to move a little bit. Now obviously where I put this will be dictated by where the strings hold and go down the neck. But the question is, if I started in this position here where the original screws were, although they're too close together now, but if I was using that as my start point, I'll just hold it there. Do I have enough room to work as a tremolo? Well, actually, I actually do. That's quite a pleasant thing, and we might even, at this rate, get away with not cutting, without cutting is the word I'm looking for. So I think the two middle ones probably are just about on the spot. Now obviously it'd be great not to, if this is already built to take a bigger block, that would be a great improvement on many small cheaper budgetary guitars. But what we have to do here is just have to double check. So where am I, if I use these holes here, which look about right, can I get to reach my high E intonation line? Because the problem is, you see, I don't want to be forward of here. Well, I could be, actually. I could go forward of there if I had to. Still just a bit squashed on the... It's better if I'm out here a little bit because I'm not encroaching on the pick guard. Okay, so if I aim to keep the middle two holes as the marker line, the question I've got is, can I reach, with these saddles, can I comfortably reach the intonation mark for the high E? So let's just have a look. If not, you see, we end up really needing to be further forward this way. So the intonation mark should be across the top of this. I think we'll just get to it, and it will be something like this. actually what we're really saying is we're on the back edge. We're not quite on the middle. So it's an interesting little thing here. I'm going to examine which bits of wood will be the best fillers. It's of a size that it's probably too big, maybe too big for the what are those things, toothpicks. But then again, it may also be a little bit too wide for this stuff. So we might have to, if I do a little bit of sanding, it's not the right bit of material. I need a new sanding sheet, really. This is knackered. So I could make up some custom spears, and I could do it better with a little bit of the Dremel in it. So I kind of feel that this would be better. So let me just make 6 of these first of all. Let's cut it in half here. Half? No, thirds. Thirds. Great. So 6 pieces of that. Get me drill. Get a decent piece of paper, which that isn't. Uh, 120, 180 will do, I think. That's not very handy, is it, Samuel? Duh. So let's see if I can make a couple of useful dowels to fit, because this holes. I mean, the other alternative is I could drill out the 3mm, but I don't know. I kind of I almost prefer not to. So. Well, that didn't hold on very well, did it? Thanks, man. Okay, maybe I will drill. Didn't hold it very strongly, did it? Doable. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's just simpler to over drill and try to preserve that material as much as possible. But over drilling to 3mm won't be too bad. Let's find a 3mm drill. If only I kept them all in a sensible type of thing. I could instantly pull out the 3mm drill. It's 2.4, this is 3. That's not very impressive. So the quick look behind here, that doesn't go all the way through, so I don't know what the depth is exactly. Get a bit of marker. So I'm just looking to mark the drill bit so I don't go too far down. Crudishly done, but I think that will serve the purpose. So this is just slightly over 3 mils. Right, so this gives me larger holes into which I can comfortably feed these with a bit of sanding to tidy up the bottom edges and maybe a tiny bit of a point rounded onto them. So the first thing I'll do is get me some. Can you still see everything? Yes, you can. Can you see it? Yes, you can. Let's get some glue. Let's get it in here. So I'm going to go slightly to the right of the center 2. So we're going to use the center 2 as the center marker, and then we're going to come back off that a little bit. Now I could sort of wait up and try and hold off until I put some strings on it, but actually, judging by this positioning, we should be able to line it up without going through that much. So first one, let's just mark it up. Really good. So now I can use this piece as well. A bit more glue. It's reached its bottom. Let's get a bit of that stuff. What's it called? You know the stuff. Kitchen roll. Okay. So this week I have some interesting practice research to do for myself. I am not making enough progress on a couple of songs that I'm playing with this band. There's a couple of songs or bits of songs that I haven't got the muscle memory part of it right, and it's annoying me. So I've sort of thought about my bad habits, and I've got terribly bad practice habits, which is almost I don't practice at all by any real thing. I'm a sort of front room, late night noodler, often with a piece of my favourite music playing that I might play along with or try and learn. But it's not really that good a discipline. And part of what I've realised is that my space is not good to do that. So sort of doing it at night when everyone's in their rooms type of thing, and you can't really make a noise, and I'm usually tired by that time. I've done my workshop shift and so on. So just I'm having to think about ways of doing it differently and better. And I think one of the things I might have to look at is just making my shift a practice session rather than, so I perhaps give myself certainly either a break. Now the problem is now I need to take this off to get at these little stumps. Yeah, so give myself a chance to do it whilst feeling not tired. Now this is a slight problem. The problem I've got here is I've got to remove this plate if I want to preserve the marker. So to get in and cut these back, I have to remove the plate. Yeah, so anyway, so I'm thinking about how I perhaps rethink practicing so I do it when I'm not tired, and even maybe I thought maybe I should come up to the workshop and do it. So it's away from home and it's a fixed period of time, and I don't allow myself to do any guitar building, but I just get on with playing, so I can feed in the tunes I need to play along with, and I can get up the tab or whatever I need to do. So I'm thinking that might be a good way to go about it. So at this point I'm also trying to remove this thing. Okay, so that's been adjusted by someone. Not bad, I suppose, but it's flaking off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut in and remove these sticky up bits without slicing my own fingers off, hopefully. Now, this doesn't have to be, you know, ridiculously flat, but we'll just get as good as I can. So I'm going to go in and use a lot of this dowel as my new wood for putting these screws in. And I find that one of the hardest things, or one of the trickiest things when you're repositioning a bridge, is getting the new screws in the place where you want them, because they often want to sort of wander off. Now I'm feeling straight away that when I put this in here, we're so close to touching that side that if I'm not careful, if I go anywhere near it, then we could be touching. We don't want it rubbing at all. And if I'm doing this carefully, I'm doing it so I don't have to reroute everywhere. So it would be silly to go through all this trouble of getting it as carefully positioned as this, only to find we're rubbing on the side of the thing, and it would be potentially, where would it be? Actually, if anything, it'd be rubbing just on this. So what I might just do, contrary to almost everything I was saying then, is I might get me a Dremel, because we have a big chunk of this hidden under here, but it's the only bit, this is the only bit that could get in the way. It's a lip here. So I think this deserves a little bit of treatment. So a little bit of extra removal there, which nobody will know, because now I can push it off a little bit to one side. I don't want to do it that far, but that's actually do a tiny bit more. But that's nice to just give us that little bit of extra leeway. It's not exactly the right shape corner, but it should allow me a bit of lateral movement. There you go. That's good. Gives me a bit of extra room. Now we've got horrible bits of plastic caught up in these pickups here, which would be nice to clean up. But just for a minute, let's put that down in there. Squeeze that under there, which is not the easiest to fits in the world. Put that in there. Get this out of the way of there for a minute. There we go. So we get everything lined back up where it would be. In fact, I probably ought to just do that for a minute. Put this one, guide it where it used to be, so we know exactly where it sits when everything's right. Which is probably about right there. So there's my centre points. That's half and half. Now we're going to go back a little bit off the centre, but not too much. And we're going to go dead centre on those. So we go back there and we're clear, but we're a little bit far ahead. So there is this thing about, if we stick to this, leave the scratch plate where it is, we can walk backwards a little bit and go to there. So let's see. I'm going to go to there. So the question is, does this actually work better straight down on the original spot? I think it actually might do. Do you know that? So if I just go there and there, this is the tricky bit. So this is slightly off to the outside and slightly, oh God, make a mess, why don't you? Slightly off to the outside. So first mark is there, second mark is there. Let's check these out again. Centered on there, centered on there. I think we've got enough. We can get more if we go forward, but we aren't going to do that. We're going to stay with where we're at. Okay, so now we go to our new stuff. This is the new stuff. And I'm going to get out our trim claw screws, which are slightly different types. What have they done? Oh my God. Well, not. No, this is what Rob has sent me, and there's two different kinds. Ha. So I'm going to go with the nickel looking ones because I've got a feeling, geez, I don't even know. Are they more likely to be the right ones? Well, first of all, we don't have a full set of them, or do we? Yes, we do. So we've got some chrome ones and we've got some nickel ones. Now this is the challenge. The nickel-y looking ones, they are the right size, but what angle can they do? They can do a pretty good angle. That's all right. So the next important thing is we gauge the thread size that we're going to cut to. So it's 3.5 mil, and the problem with 3.5 mil is we don't want to make it too easy and slushy, so we don't use this size. We want to use a smaller size, but we might want to do it in a couple of bites. The dowel in here is not massively, it's not hugely hardwoodish. I mean, it says it's hardwood, but it's quite mushy. So it's going to, the screw will go into it very easily, so it's better that it is a little bit less, a bit smaller than too large. So now I'm just going to mark the depth, maximum depth of this. I hope this will stay in place. Yep, that'll do. So I'm now going to attempt to get the first mark done. It's dead on the middle. It's quite chunky actually, we might need another wider one. Let's go again. So I've made the first hole, which is at least in the right place. So let me mark up, gauge off another piece, another bit. So you can see that bridge changes like this do kind of complicate things quite a bit, but you've got to get it right. Like this one, I have to say, is turning out to be quite a bit easier than I imagined, or more cooperative. Now what you can do, I can do, where's it gone? Oh no, here it is. Right. If I want to just make sure this goes in straight, I can just put a little bit of a countersink just to catch the larger drill bit. Right, now I'm going to take one of these, this one, the center one, and I'm going to just try it out for size in that position. Now I obviously don't want that much downward pressure on it because I want it to rock, but I just wanted to cut this thread that far. Okay, so that is quite a thin. I wonder if these are going to be better. I'm maybe slightly concerned that this set could be too wide. Now this is going to make this one too loose, but it will do for the time being. I can make the other ones around it work. It's not actually too bad. Okay, so I think that's a better sized, this bit. So I'm going to put these. See, that's how easily you can get it wrong. So I'm moving these out of the way and I'm going for the thinner ones because that's what will fit better. Right, now I'm looking at this position. Everything's looking good with that position. I'm going to do the first drill, and this is the really hard bit, is getting these things to stay in place now. So there's me, the hole on target. For goodness sakes. So the first two. Okay, so now with these placed where they are, the middle spot looks pretty much dead on. What I now need to do is mark up the center points of center points of these holes, and that's actually not as easy as it looks, so you need a bit of a good eye for that. Now, according to this, I've moved a fraction this way on the whole thing, and we can we can do a check now by grabbing hold of a couple of spare strings from somewhere. What were these from? 9 point. Let's pause. Too short. Right. Let's get a couple of dodgy, cheap Harley Benton strings. So we just need a thick string and a thinnish string just to test these out. Worth doing before I do any more holes, because once we've got this, aligned and we know it's good to go, then we can stop worrying and get on with completing the setup. So it's worth spending a couple of strings, sacrificial strings like this. Guess what I don't. Do I really want to do? No, I won't put. I was thinking about whether I put the springs on yet, but I won't just yet. So. Round you go. Just the bridge clonking at the moment. So I just want to. I don't care about how messy this is. I just want strings on there. Okay, so now I'm getting a feel for where this sits. It's pulling round. That's probably why I should probably put the springs on. Let's have a look. It's not going to hurt. Those are the old ones. Let's put the new ones on. What the hell's wrong with this? It's a very rubbish pair of pliers. Why am I using those? And there's precision ones here. Right, let's put one in the centre. Okay, so because it's got one string tightened up here, it's pulling off completely off to one side. So let us put a couple more springs in here to balance it up, and we'll just get to make sure that it's missing all the sides and everything when it's seated comfortably. Okay, so that's still pulling to one side, but that's fine because we're not in position just yet. So I think probably I need to put a couple more in place before but then I'm trying to figure out whether I'm in the right spot generally. So I don't want to. I'll just keep it there. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. I'm just going to keep it there and align it by hand so I know it's in the right place. And then I'll just look at the side-to-side fixture. Now we've added width to the string spread, you see, with this. That's not too bad. We could probably just get away with this. Yeah, I think we'll be all right. Now this is, if I put it on too tight, it's going to pull the bridge out of alignment again, because until I've got all the screws in place, it's not going to stay. It's going to pivot around these middle two for the time being. But what I'm looking at right here is with it pretty much lined up here, maybe a little bit of a push around like so. Right, that's kind of nicely aligned. And then what have we got? Well, it's pretty good. We've got a little bit of extra room on the treble side, which is what we'd really want. We're a little thin on room at this top end. We might be able to cure that with the nut, wherever that's gone, which is here. No, the nut is, here it is. So I'm just going to, see, this is a lot of thinking out loud. I can see what I'm looking at. Thinking on your feet. So what I'm looking for is, that's the same spacing. That's probably going to stay where it is. So actually that was where it was before, so we didn't really have a better positioning thanks to the nut anyway. I do have a bit of an option with this one to pull it in a fraction. That drags this one out a little bit. Actually this one will hardly move. one of the problems we've got on this guitar is we've got very long slope on the frets, and taking this out as much as we've done actually probably isn't much different from how it was playing before, because I can see that with this nut on here we would always be in a situation where we're near the edge. The only way we're going to get around this is to bring everything into a kind of an artificial spread to about something like, well actually the bass one's okay, we'd have to bring the high E in a little bit like that, and that is quite a big move, and we'd have to do a custom nut for that. So, well, okay, first things first. Happy with the positioning of the bridge, first of all. Too much that way, too much that way. No, we've got to be this way, otherwise it's going to, if we go any further that way, it's going to be even closer to the edge. So we don't have no choice. We want to be that way. Yeah, I think that's how it's going to be. It's the way it's going to be, little darling. So, while it's standing there and you can't see me, well maybe you can now if you look over here. I'm now going to mark the other center points that I'm confident are in the right place. I'm hungry. I have not eaten properly. So what I'm doing is I'm just committing these marks okay, let's take the strings off. So, okay, so what I've discovered with this guitar is it has a problem with the slight problem with the slopingness of the frets. So in an ideal world, these frets would have been straighter sided, in which case you'd have more playing room on them. So I suspect this was always very slightly near to being off the edge. Right, so those two are dead strings. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. And what I'm going to do while we're here is I'm going to now drill the first or the rest of the pilot holes. There's glue involved in here as well, so it's hard to get that unclogged. Right, here we go. Yes. Let us brush this clean, may we? Dead strings, dead strings. Search for brush. String bags, old things. Yoo-hoo, brush. Paper. Brush, thank you. So the next thing to just quickly check, oh no, let's put the bleeding screws in first. Let us get that bit done. Right. Did we drill them bigger? We didn't yet. No, let's clean this and drill it bigger. Right, sorry, I'm not very talkative in this one because I'm concentrating. Two of the four. And almost there. Right. Oh no, is that the right ones? Have I gone and picked up the wrong ones again? No, that's the right ones. There's chromy looking things. Thank you. Now I'm going to just have a quick feel of. Whoops, not that. It's too stiff. Okay, that's good. We're moving. I swear by these Wilkinson tremolos. Why, they're the only kind I'll use. So we have a lot of springs on, and we have a working tremolo. Which needs a certain height of screw, but you just want to go until the plate moves and then you back off. Maybe, baby. Moves back off. Moves back off. And it's very stiff at the moment because we've got 3 springs giving it some welly and nothing pulling in the opposite direction. So, okay, so there's our pivot point. Seems to be just clear of any scratch plates. So I don't think we'll get any obstructions. Right, now what I want to just look at is this is a bit of a mess down here. Just cut free this horrible plastic nastiness. Probably a little bit down here as well. Okay, so we've got our high E looks like on the right spot. Everything's looking good here. I'm going to remove these guides now because we'll be now working with normal intonation to make sure everything's right. And I've got a bit of green stuff stuck under the bridge right here. Would you believe it? Thank you. Okie dokie. So that's good. Ready to go. We need to clean up the whole guitar, and we've got some loose strap buttons here. Let me just see if they're okay or whether they need filling and gluing while we're at it. Sorry about the vision. It's a bit rubbish, I know. Stay on the bench, please. Actually, I can't get this thing. It squashes the felt nicely out of the way, no matter what I try to do. So I'm trying. Okay, nicely stiffened up. Okay, so I'm going to take a clear up in a second and re-establish where I'm at. So we have done the leveling. We've done the bridge swap over, got it exactly in the right position. We've basically tightened up the strap buttons for good measure. I'm going to give things a little bit of an initial clean, but we're going to go over it again. Some people sand out, what do you call them? Sometimes they get a, I don't know, Dremel sometimes, and a buffing thing, and clean up those poles on the pickups, but I'm not going to do that here because we haven't really discussed that, and I don't want to change the look of things other than giving it a clean up, which is what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm going to come back and clean it all a bit later anyway. I just wanted a quick clean up for now. Right. Okay, so main thing to do now is to mask off everything on the neck, and I'll do most of that off camera. Oh right, this is the other thing. I was going to check and see how easy it is to remove this nut. So, got me a couple of tiny little screwdrivers. So while I'm here, I'm going to just tap these down and see if they will help remove the nut. This one's coming out pretty well, breaking in the middle. It's plastic, so not really that surprising. So that's that taken care of. There you go. So we've got a good replacement, with the only proviso being it's going to give us the same spacing as before, which is a little bit close, but we can't really do anything about that. So I'll come back to this afterwards, or off camera. I'll just sand this down until it fits into this slot. I think this is a very narrow slot actually. It's not even wide enough to get the Hosco slot file in there, so I don't think we'll end up having much luck trying to widen that any. But if we're going to go with an adjustable nut, then it's just going to be a matter of thinning this nut down until it fits. So again, I'll do that off camera. A bit boring. All right, get rid of some rubbish, and most of the thing I need to do now for the next bit is off camera. I'm going to mask off all of this fingerboard, as you can see here, and then I'm going to sand and polish out the frets. And once that's done, I will be ready to clean over the whole guitar, clean the neck properly, give it some oil, and then we'll be ready to restring. So I'll see you in a short while. So we're back after the fret leveling and all of that. So first thing to do is to remove all of this and give the guitar a clean. Or continue cleaning it, give it more of a clean. You can see how much dust can build up. I've had folks in the past say, oh, when you're leveling the frets, polishing the frets, aren't you creating lots of little iron filings? And amazingly, you'd maybe think so, wouldn't you? But actually the dust that comes off the frets is nickel, yep, it's definitely that, nickel and copper. So it's not really magnetic, it's not like iron filings, which would stick to your pickups. So the kind of people panicking thing, I can wipe any dust off the pickups I like. Now I cover them over during the polishing process only because, or sanding part I should say, it's only because I don't want to sand the pickup poles at the same time. Anyway, so it's not really a problem. It's really not a problem, folks. I'll tell you what is a problem. I've just been listening to a financial type expert who I've actually been following for a couple of years, mainly because of his analysis about COVID. He became for me the best source of smart statistical analysis. He's a investment expert, I suppose, by profession. But he started applying his expertise to the COVID situation, and I really respect his take on it. So I kind of followed his lead or his insights pretty closely. And I've just listened to a video podcast he's just done about the financial situation we're in now with the reduction of oil, or the cessation of Russian oil, the turning away from Russian oil, and he keep the story short. We in Europe are heading towards the Middle Ages in a hurry, and people, you wouldn't believe anything like that was impending. The way Chris Martenson, you have to look up his stuff, Chris Martenson, but the way he talks about the reduction of, we have to get by, our economy has to instantly get by on a third less diesel, which is, he talks about as being the workhorse of the economy, which is correct. So we have to try and imagine our economy continuing to run on a third less diesel than we've had before. And his point is that it's impossible. He said it's ludicrous. You can't run your airplane on a third less jet fuel. You can't run your farm on a third less diesel than you used to. You might save a bit if you implement some incredibly clever things and innovations and whatever over time, but we're talking instantly from as of now. And he says quite rightly, it's simply not possible. And he points out that if he were to write a paper claiming that we could do that just like that in an instant, we'd be locked up. He'd be locked up for his being completely unrealistic about anything. But I haven't finished listening to this particular episode because I wanted to finish this job here. But one of the things he talks about is that he's a prepper, and I don't mean that in the American up in the hills with guns type of prepper, although he is an American and he may well be up in his hills with guns for all I know. But he's talking about, over the last few years he's been seeing this kind of developing, and so his way of prepping is to get ready to grow his own crops and so on and so forth for just a basic sustenance level. And it's interesting to think that you know, as I'm sitting here watching prices going up and knowing that we are currently not buying Russian oil, and I totally get why. You know, we're trying to help save the slaughter of thousands of Ukrainian civilians and soldiers, but so I get why we're doing it, but he's kind of pointing out to us that it's not feasible that we're going to be able to survive it because the change is too great in one go. It's the speed of change that he talks about, and I have to say I think he's right. So it surprises me, of all the things we're facing, which are incredibly, there's so many that are currently incredibly profound and worrying. There we go, are we just about in? Yeah, yes, we're in. Okay, now I think we could just, I'm hopeful, we just could hoik this nut over a little bit. So let's try and do that. I'm trying to get as close as I can to in here to mark this off. Not very easy to see. Anyway, yeah, with everything we're facing, I find it really hard to see that our country, Britain, seems to be kind of hell bent on focusing on its summer holidays and, you know, flights and getting stranded or whatever, you know, that's going on, and very few people are looking at the end, what appears likely to be the end of the sort of corporate capitalist honeymoon, consumerist honeymoon, seems to be on the brink of disappearing. And, you know, I'm sitting here looking at it thinking, well, look at me, I'm buying stuff for doing guitar setups, and then it's all going up in price, and the petrol to get to the workshop is going up in price, and eventually there'll come a point where there isn't variety for me to choose from in terms of products for what I do, and eventually it may not even be possible to get things that customers want, and then actually it's quite likely that at some point getting your guitar set up suddenly won't be a priority for customers when they are perhaps more involved in trying to find where food is going to come from. Because, you know, people often say this, but when the food stops being there, or I stop being able to earn the money to buy some, then where do you go? Does the world sort of settle down into did Britain go into sort of an emergency state, in a situation where the government will come along and deliver food for all of us? Or, you know, are we going to find we're just going to go hungry and wander around the streets with our zombified look on our faces? I don't know. It has, of course, never happened thusly, so we don't know. But I do think things are about to change. All at the perfect time for our pal Vladimir Putin, which is kind of crazy to think that he's picked a good time to be invading countries and stealing grain when nobody else can get hold of any, and the prices are just going up. It's worrying. Right, I'm just going to step over to the drill and do the try and do the drill, the drilling for the grub screws, and then we can get this adjustable nut in place and working. It's quite difficult to get a starter hole in these. I think I'm there. Yes, weird and scary times. And of course everybody can't deal with it, so they'll just carry on behaving as if nothing is about to change. And I think it actually will. Could change very soon for all we know. Oh, wrong one. Adjustable nuts. Let's bring you across here so you can see what I'm doing. Yes, so yeah, you know, we sort of talk about it for a bit and then people go, oh yeah, it probably will. Yeah, we're a bit worried, you know. But hey, anyway, I'll book my holiday and I better go into work tomorrow and this and that, and sort of part of me goes, there might not actually be that kind of tomorrow any minute now. Because what Chris Marstonson was talking about was how when you starve a complex industrial financial system of the energy that it requires to run, the point he was making is that it starts to shed components of itself that it can't afford to run anymore. You know, and obviously ultimately just ending up with the absolute minimum of things running that can be fueled. And just even that as a thing that when you say it in those terms it sounds completely logical. You know, can't afford to have all of these things on at once, what ones you're going to have on or whatever that comes out as. And yet, logical though that is, nobody's actually living like that or being bound by that, or even expecting that to happen or start shedding things quickly. You know, Chris was saying, you know, let's hope we when we come to shed things, let's hope that the politicians in power make the right decisions, you know, and keep the important things for running our stripped down economies, which may be more like living in the Middle Ages for a while or forever for all we know. But then he said it's highly unlikely that they will make the right decisions because mostly they haven't up till now, and it's election time coming up, and even if the world's about to end, people will still promise and keep the things that are, you know, represent their interests to their constituents and so on, rather than doing the thing that we actually need to do. And of course that is so depressingly familiar, as we know. So anyway, don't wish to be gloomy, but I'm genuinely starting to expect that it won't be long before I can't do this, because the system that supports this quaint little working process and making a living from doing what I do, won't be around much longer. And quite frankly, there's nothing I can do about it. Unfortunately, not one of those dunderheads in the financial hierarchy that makes those decisions. Right, so for this now I need to reduce this down. I'm just looking at the depth of this slot. It's probably just about enough to work with this. The danger of, if it's a shallow slot, we can find ourselves struggling to have enough nut in operation, if you like, because it has to be so low to begin with to work. Yeah. So the idea is I need to take the nut down to a point where, when it's seated on the floor of the slot, the strings are left just about touching the first fret, and that's the target for me. And if I just use this as a guide, it's not showing up yet that we're in that kind of position. Ow! It's getting shorter, so I'm chopping my hands off while I'm trying to sand it. So that's the idea. We take it down and down and down and down until we get to the right action. Nearly. Yes, so I think people genuinely can't handle looking at huge threats of change. I just think it's too much, understandably in some ways. And they just carry on as if things are going to go on like this forever, which I don't actually think they can, for the reasons we're looking at right now, which we're actually already just beginning to feel the start of the energy crisis. That means we're now seeing an unending increase in the price of fuel. And where does it go now ultimately? Where do we go? How am I going to, if it carries on, when will I stop being able to do what I'm doing now? When it's £5 a litre? Will I still manage to put enough in the tank to just get up to the workshop but then I won't be able to send things out because Parcel Force will have folded because they can't make any money running a courier business and so on and so forth. So very we do think it will go on undisturbed for a long time, and I'm not sure that it will. Okay, so I don't know what we can see here, but now I'm going to do the final bits. Right, so I'm going to try and pull out this nut. Come on. And I'm now going to use the pointy grub screws to do markings. Now, I can use it to mark. What's wrong with this hex key? It's too fat. It won't go in the end. Oh, for God's sakes. Or is it something? Is it the hex key that's wrong, or is it the grub screw? I don't know, but it's not going into the end of the grub screw. Whereas that one isn't either. Let's try this one. I think that's just about right. Dodgy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wind the grub screw in far enough to stick the sharp bit out the end, and I'm going to get another one that's sharp as well, like so. I'm going to throw that one over my shoulder, and I'm going to use these two sharp pointed grub screws to mark where I want the the nut to sit in the slot, because I'm going to make two slight depressions. After all that good news you've been talking about, two slight depressions in the rosewood here, and so I line it up where I think it's the right place, so I get flush either side like so. I'm going to get me a tap down either end, mark the spot. It's pretty clear where it went. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge those little marks and make them into very small depressions that will stop the feet of the grub screws moving off sideways. And I will also just round off the bottom of the grub screws as well, so they're not pointy and sharp, so they don't dig into the rosewood. And I found over time that the rosewood stands up pretty well to the flattened feet standing on them. It doesn't have a problem with that. So I now just quickly use this to flatten off, so stay in place. So this is the flattening the grub screw bit, and then what I'll do is I'll get the little drill bits and I'm going to go in and drill the little recesses in the nut slot. The benefit of doing all this, and some people might think this is incredibly fiddly, what it does allow me to do is it allows me to get a first fret action like no other. It's really accurate, and I can set it to exactly what I want instead of having to drill it down and cut it down with, what do you call them, those things, nut files, slot files, which I actually don't like to use anymore. I kind of got used to using them, and I just find they're quite a crude way of achieving what we're trying to achieve. And what we're trying to achieve is the perfect first fret action with a friction-free nut of the correct material. And here we have the way I do it. So nut goes in there, sits in there perfectly well, doesn't move from side to side, and as soon as I put any load on the nut and lift the wind in the grub screws to lift the nut up onto its little legs just fractionally, then what we'll find is the feet stay in those little depressions and the thing will not move from side to side. So we're almost at the end game, which I'm pleased to say. So what have we got to do? We've got to oil the fingerboard. I'm also going to stick this little hex key which comes with the adjustable nut. It's going to go on the body or on the scratch plate of the guitar, like so. And okay, so interesting, this has got some wax on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some, what was that I just flung on the floor? Hello? Was it that? Why would it be that? No, it's a drill bit. There's a jack socket. Thank you. Jack socket, unused, might as well keep that. Right, yes, we're going to put some oil now onto the thing with an oily rag. Right. So next stop will be putting the strings on, and after that it will be a case of stretching them out and then just checking and resetting the action. Once they're stretched out, I'll intonate the strings, and we'll just tweak the tremolo arm or setting so that it's firmly decked, but can be used in a downward shimmer if Rob wants to, which is to all intents and purposes locked in place, but available for use without too much struggle. So that's all about setting the just the right amount of spring loading that holds it in place, but that means you don't have to really struggle to press it downwards. There's a kind of midpoint, or the sweet spot where you just about get it right. So, oiled fretboard, strings. Here we go. Strings, and now I'm going to put this over here. Take the long view, so I can lift this up and get these strings through. Now these are in the pairs again, aren't they? These are whites. No, whites are not. The blues are the biggest. So this is the E and the G. So I'll get this right. Low E and the G. Yes, where are we going? What's going on? Well, I'm not really in a very good position to grow food, although providing we don't have to move out from our rented place, which would be quite funny if we don't have earnings. What happens when the world falls to bits like that? Does your council, housing association, landlord go, oh, I'm sorry, the world has come to a crashing halt. Capitalism has failed over the last 2 weeks. The whole economy is in shutdown, but I'm afraid we are going to have to evict you anyway. I'm not sure it makes any sense if we get to that stage. I can't see how anyone can hold on to anything that way. Okay, so while I'm at it, I'm going to, Rob, you'll have seen this before in previous videos, I know. Where are we? Hello. Oh yes, there we are. I'm going to just show the stringing up, and I'm going to start with, where's the winder? I'm going to start by attaching the D and the G strings first to keep this nut in place, which is pretty solidly in place. And there's also loose tuners here, so I'm going to just put some welly into tightening those up, and they're all over the place. Wow, that's quite a few years of coming undone. Right, so I'm going to start with the D again. Come back to here. With these easy lock tuners, I just use the top one, and I go through all the way, drop it in its slot, pull back a fret's worth and start winding. Hold the held string over the loose string on the first time round, and then as it comes round, push the held string below the loose string, yank the loose string up in the air, and just keep the held string going underneath there. And then it stops about there, and it can line up with this little string tree. Okay, now what I'm seeing straight away is the where's my bits? Right, straight away the action is right down on the ground. So let us bring up this D and see if we get anywhere near to where it's meant to be, because the bridge is obviously a different construction to the other one. Wow. Okay, now we need to bring up the damn, I'm going to have to use my own hex key. Bring up the adjustable nut a little bit. I do it on both sides together. And we want to lift that off the first fret, which it now is. Come on. Thank you. Okay, let's do the G next. Same way, top thing, you know what I mean. Top hole, pull back one fret, wind on, hold the held wire over the loose wire first time round, and then under the loose wire second time round, yanking the loose wire up, get it out of the way, and then that can go back under there. When these things stick. Right, now I'm going to just lightly attach the other strings, and then we'll kind of look at the overall action, because this is a completely new bridge. Obviously it may have a completely different profile and sort of height off the deck to the old one. I didn't kind of measure them in that way together, so I'll have a look and make sure we can achieve the playing action that we want. Let's get the clippers and take off these excess string bits before we wind it on fully. Okay, let's bring this up as well. Quite good actually. The way it's seating at the moment means all of the grub screws at the bridge should be hidden in the body of the saddles, which means they're not sticking up and getting in the way of your hands, which is a nice touch, because that's one of the nastiest bits about a tremolo bridge, when the whole thing, when the grub screws are poking into your hands out the top of the saddles. Over the loose one, back round, under the loose one, and however many more times it needs to go. Okay, now the A and the E. So we have to treat, because the bridge is new, we have to treat everything as if the original setup that I did earlier on has of course changed. The neck, despite the bridge changing, the neck will behave the same when loaded with the same gauge of strings, which is what I'm doing now, and the neck won't really mind that the bridge has changed. It doesn't really care about that. It just cares that the whole thing is loading in the same way with the same kind of force, and the wood of the neck will then behave in a familiar way. So I'm ravenous and hungry. Okay, low E, same thing, hold it over the loose one, push it down below the loose one on the next time round, and cut the loose one before we disappear out of sight around here. Okay, so how's that looking all over? Not too bad. And we got back just enough room on the high E as well, which I'm pleased to see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take care of the last fret action. Make sure everything's sitting where we want it. So I'm looking for 1.5 here, which is 1.5. Too low there. Nearly. Tweak, tweak. About right. Oops. 1.5, tiny bit too high. and down with this one. Okay. Okay, so that's interesting. That's quite high at this end. Let's reduce it. So funny, a minute ago that seemed like it was too high. Now it looks about right. Okay, so we've got, what have we got? I see, we've got a flat, a curve, so that one has to be, so we have to base it off the middle too. That's the way we have to do it. Right, let's get the tune. Pickups are too high by miles, so we just need to take those down somewhat. Rule of pickups is that the closer the pole is to the string, the greater the output, but the lower or the less the tonal dynamics. Whoa, what that was. Okay, let's move on to stretching the strings out. So, before we do any intonation, we grab hold of the strings and we push and pull between thumb and four fingers to get rid of any slack that's left in there. So yeah, so with the pickups, the word on the street is experiment, really. I've dropped them down lower now, but see if you can tell a difference in the tone. That's the word on the street. It's the kind of received wisdom. Whether this is gospel truth or not, I don't know. Come back to that in a minute. Continue with the stretching of the strings, keep them in tune. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to try and get the string to stabilize their tuning, and then after that we'll check for intonation using the tuner. Once that's done and set, then we'll just tweak the tremolo claw screws until we're on the balance that's right for the tremolo, so it can be used in the down position. Oh, down only rather than floating. Very nice. There's some rubbish. I've got to get this guitar home, pack it, book a courier and all those things. So next step before we run out of power and the will to do anything, the intonation check. So being a function of distance, we cunningly use pitch to measure what's going on. Right on. That's because I did it on the previous bridge and marked where the high E was. Delicious. Right, next thing to do is to just adjust the claw screws, and we're going to bring them out until such point as the string pull starts to overcome the springs and pull downwards. And then we'll work backwards from that to a point where it's safely down and stays down without even when you're bending. So still we're not getting any lift from the strings yet. So the tremolo claw was quite a long way in. Now we're getting a little bit of wondering whether that is just nicking there. I have a feeling it is. There's just a touch point which I don't like. Let's see if I can just make an adjustment. You shall see. If necessary, I will take the strings off very quickly. And the whole point, as I wanted to make this usable, and it should, having taken the care to make it, giving it enough room, make sure it's got enough room to move downwards, it should return to pitch nicely, but I think it's just touching the pickguard edge. So it may be a matter of removing these here things. Don't worry, we can get it all back on nicely in a little while. Worth doing this little extra bit, I think. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, go over that side if you must. Okay, I'm going to use the Dremel. So I take me a small amount of the plastic away. It's not a bit difficult to reach. Just make sure when this is back in here it all lines up. Yeah, that's just clear of that. It'll be good. I think we are clear of it. Yeah, oh really? Sit down there, thank you. Okay, almost there. Off the bits off there, and then we come back up this end. I'm a bit fiddly about untangling the strings to reuse them or reattach them, but hey. Anyway, so you can guess I've sort of run out of steam for witty conversation. Come on, out you come. Through there. Okay. So one of the reasons why I don't like locking tuners is often you find yourself in real life having to do things like this. We think, oh bugger, I've got to take the strings off, come back and redo the whatever. And when you're in that situation, the locking tuners are very unforgiving, and because they crimp the string quite destructively, you very often find that when people use locking tuners the way they expect to be able to use them, which is, I don't want any strings around my post, so I'm going to ram the string all the way through, I'm going to lock it off, and that's all that I'm going to do. And I'm going to enjoy the full benefits of a locking tuner doing its service, working for me. And the problem is, that sounds great, but then when you've crimped it down and you've put massive pressure on the string, what happens is that the minute you come to slack it off, you suddenly realise, oh damn, I've got to redo or such and such. The minute that happens, your string is already crimped, and as soon as you slack it, it usually breaks. If it doesn't break at that point, it'll certainly break the next time you run it and crimp on the same spot again. So even if customers insist on having locking tuners, I am almost always, despite them being locking, I almost always insist on winding on a little bit of extra unnecessary windings, so that I can, if I have to undo them again, I can sacrifice that first bit, and then the next time I go to fasten them, I push the damaged, crimped bit of string further through, because I gave myself that little bit of extra wrap the first time round. I can push that damaged string through and end up by locking on a fresh bit of string, and I think that is about the only way. I've learned the hard way too many times, because you know, particularly on things like Gibsons, when I've had to, I think I finished the job, a 3-a-side Gibson headstock with locking tuners, and then I realised that, oh no, I've got to go and turn the saddles around on the damned Tunematic bridge saddles, and found myself having to undo them and then finding them breaking in every opportunity. Okay, so now I'm going to just stretch a little bit, get this slack taken up again, having had them off the guitar, and then we'll go tune. I'm not plugged in, I might as well. Okay. Okay, so just going to double check that all of these are far enough out. In fact, they must be. We must be sitting flat. Let's go back half a turn. Quarter of a turn. So that's now sitting floating a bit, but we don't want it floating that much. So we're going to now send the screws further in again. Obviously that's not in tune yet. What you want is to have it so that when you bend a note, any droning notes don't also go out of tune. So that's pulling forward and that's putting it slightly out of tune as you put it forward. So it's just a matter of spring tension. Sort of basically go until the bends don't. So you've got a bit of downward play. That's just not bad. Do you know what? That feels like it wants a tiny bit of sponge or something under there. because that tilts back and just clunks. How weird is that? I don't really have anything that would do that job. The tiniest bit of sponge under the back side of that bridge would be quite cool. Why don't the regular tremolo make that clunk when it goes back? Never heard that. I bet you I can find a bit of soft stuff that will go under there. It will probably be a bit of tape of some sort. A bit of tape. It's metal against thing, isn't it? So. Still gonna, that's not soft enough. What do you want? You want some sort of fibery thing, a bit of sponge to it. This will do. Sorry, I've probably conked out. Yes, you've conked out long ago. We're probably working now only on, what do you call it, overhead view. Let's just have a listen. You've got to get it touched down if you want it to do that, because it will be it stays in tune that way. But it just seems a bit clunky. I guess I'm not used to having it touched down. I'm used to having it floating or not in action really. Anyway, okay, we're done. Thank you for watching the remains of the camera over there. I don't know what's happened here. Yep, we have run out of something. Apparently we have, what have we done? I'm not sure what we got to do here. Wow. I'll switch off in a minute, but I want to see first of all what happened here. Come on, out of there, into here. Library. We've got 26 minutes of that, and that ended in, come on man, got the nut done. Oil, oh well, not so bad. We got most of it on the overhead. Switch audio. See you again.